Hello, and welcome to Wanderlust Presents History Boys podcast. And so this is just a little podcast we're putting together to sort of talk about the process that we've currently got going for making what will be a very good show. And with us today we have...
Lauren Steele. I'm the director.
Ooh. And then we have...
I'm Andy Kerr. I play Hector in the History Boys.
And we also have...
I'm Adam Stubbs. I play Erwin.
I'm Alex Webber-Day. I'm playing Dakin.
I'm Cameron Steen. I'm playing Scripps.
And I'm kind of the host for tonight, and I'm Finn, and I'm playing Timms. And so, so yeah, basically, we're putting together a good production of quite a famous play, and quite a famous play. You may have heard of it. But I mean, the first question is to Lauren, who's here basically as a member of Wanderlust Theatre, which is a wonderful theatre company based in Liverpool, and sort of asking, why is it that you picked History Boys for this production?
So History Boys is one of my favourite modern plays. So my interest runs more toward classic theatre, so Shakespeare and Coward to a certain extent. But I like Bennett. I think he's very good. So having done God of Carnage in 2018, which is a four-hander, and only about an hour and 10 minutes long, we thought we'd dive in at the deep end and go with a much larger cast and a much longer show.
Yeah, considerably larger.
Yeah, a lot larger, and generally just sort of try and challenge ourselves a little bit, because it is production-wise a very challenging show, but it's also quite a challenging show in terms of casting as well, getting your cast right, pitching it well, the chemistry is often quite difficult to capture. I think we're doing very well, and so ultimately it was for the love of the play and the challenge as well.
It's good to hear. I mean, I'd say personally, this is the first Wanderlust show I've been involved in, as with, I think, everyone here.
I think I'm the only one who's worked with Lauren before.
Yeah.
I was out of these four.
The young bloods.
Out of the young bloods.
Cameron is my only victim.
Yeah. But we're all having a pretty damn good time, I'd say.
We have to say that.
We're not under duress.
I'll leave the room.
But yeah, so I'd say like one of the sort of the things that kind of strikes me is so like this play is so large and so influential, and it's only it's under 2 decades old.
Absolutely, yeah. Early noughties, it was on at the West End, and then it was Broadway extension. It's it was huge. It was the Jerusalem of that decade, and obviously Nick Heitner as well at the time was the artistic director of the National, and that's where it sort of started. And so I mean it's peak theatre, and I think it's still relevant. I think it will continue to still be relevant. I'd say fundamentally it's about, and I know it's quite ironic that I'm a woman saying this, but it's about the life of young men, the development of young men,
it definitely is.
The feelings and emotions and everything that sort of a young man goes through, both from a young man's perspective and from the perspective of his teacher as well. And obviously then there's the nuances as well, which I'm sure you guys will sort of talk about, but
yeah, it's certainly relatable, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'd say going through it, because I'm ashamed to say this, but I've only seen bits of the film, and that is my understanding of.
He still hasn't read the whole play.
I still read the whole play.
Your lines are only your lines.
Instead of highlighting my own lines, I just redacted all the others, and so, but going through it as a cast has been really good fun, because I'd say that there is not a single character who is so far alienated from the audience that you can't sympathise with them in some way. I'd say maybe bar the headmaster, but even then,
we all know someone like
that.
He's a little more of an archetype than the other characters.
Oh, yeah.
The other characters are perhaps arguably
More human.
Human and layered.
But there has always been several times, like during this process, where I've like looked at something that's happened to a character and thinking, I went through that.
Yeah.
Everybody has got one thing that happens.
And you can tell that when you're watching the performances, that the moments where all of you are really sort of tuned into what's happening, and it might be that it's somebody else saying the lines or a scene that's being acted by two other people, but you guys are on the periphery just totally in tune with it, and that energy carries to the audience, and that's what I love. It's the ensemble, it's the real sort of communion of feeling and emotion.
And the distance of the headmaster is well observed as well, isn't it? Because I doubt there's anybody who went to school or who works in a school who would acknowledge the textured humanity of the head. Because everybody tends to hate them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Their job is isolating.
But James, I think, is really James Dorman, who plays the headmaster, Felix. I think he's really nailing that, and he pulls out the humour naturally. That's kind of he's got a real affinity with the humour, but at the same time he has a vulnerability that allows us to invest in him. All of the characters have a vulnerability, of course, some more than others, but generally it's Now,
actually, we do have an extract of such a sort of relatable moment with. We're going to Dakin and scripts for a very short extract.
I honestly thought you forgot my character's name. I honestly thought you were Dakin and that one. The other one.
I was looking at your faces, and you both just seemed very hesitant. But I was just sort of like, you guys ready?
We have to talk at length now.
So all this religion, what do you do?
You go to church, pray.
What else?
Well, it's more what you don't do.
You don't not wank. Jesus, you're headed for the biz.
Not forever.
Alright, yeah, just tell me on the big day and I'll stand well back.
I figured I've got to get over this romance with God now, otherwise I'll be hanging round half my life. I wouldn't wish it on any other poor sod. Parents hate it, of course. It's so ageing. Drugs, they were prepared for, but not matins. There's still some of this stuff I just don't get. Right, here, they figure you've got to love God because God loves you. Why? Posner loves you doesn't mean you have to love Posner. God's just this massive case of unrequited love. He's Hector minus the motorbike. God should get real. We don't owe him a thing.
Good thing to say at Cambridge, that.
No.
It's an angle.
It's private.
Fuck private.
Don't let Hector hear you say that. You're his best boy.
I've been reading this book by Nietzsche.
Who?
He's a philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche.
I think it's pronounced Nietzsche.
Shit.
What's the matter?
I talked to Owen about it. He didn't correct me. He let me call him Nietzsche. He'll think I'm a right fool. Shit.
Thank you very much. That was really good. Now, that was, I'd say, that's one of the things about the whole sort of atmosphere of the play that comes across very well in that scene, is that as much as it's about all this sort of art and kind of history and all these sort of quite highly revered things, it takes more of a hammer to it in a lot of cases.
It's that weird thing as well where it's like we've just finished talking about him not wanking and then we're talking about Nietzsche.
Yeah. And it's as natural as can be. Yeah.
It is, though, I think.
I think I used to say Nietzsche.
All right, get you.
I think that's
wrong.
It's still wrong.
Still wrong. It's just nice.
You just sound very cultured.
Yeah, don't say that.
Under that. Now,
I've been reading book about Nietzsche.
None of these jokes about doing it on the night are funny. Don't do it on the night. No.
The nights in question will be the 24th to the 27th of July.
Well done.
And you should all come along to Hope Street Theatre.
Where we won't ad-lib.
Where we won't ad-lib ever.
We promise, we swear.
We promise.
Yeah. Thank you for that promise.
That pregnant pause was Lauren staring at us.
The literal daggers were just coming across my living room. It's amazing.
Excuse me, thinking it was a cue for the editor.
24th to the 27th, Hope Street Theatre.
It'll be good fun. We can promise that.
Likely to sell out if the tickets are...
That's true.
If it's going the way it is.
If it's going the way it's
Yeah.
going, it's unlikely that they aren't going.
So you best get them
book
now.
your tickets online at
Yeah.
Ticketmaster.com.
We'll link it somewhere.
Yeah, we'll link it somewhere.
Is it Ticket Quarter?
Ticket Quarter.
Ticketmaster's
the one. That's the one where you
the
get
one
wherever
right.
you're listening. We'll put a link to it. Ticket Quarter,
Don't
guys.
book your tickets online at Ticketmaster.
Book them on Ticket Quarter.
Yeah.
So, like, I'd say one of the sort of major things that, for me anyway, is this is the sort of biggest production of anything I've sort of been involved with. And I'd say there's been a bit of a culture shock, but a pleasant one, sort of going through the rehearsal process and the depth of character work and sort of making sure that motivation is known. And how would you both say that you've been sort of finding Dakin and scripts?
I think it's probably the same for me as well. I've done a lot of plays, but I think this feels like it's on an extra level than the others I've done.
Agreed, yeah.
I don't know, how am I finding Dakin? It's one of those things, it's very easy to kind of just see him very superficially as like, the cool guy in school that, this very one-dimensional layer of, like to shag. But
Yeah.
it's just, there's way more to it than that. It's the kind of insecurity, there's these like layers of his curiosity, his sexual curiosity. Is like I really found it quite challenging to kind of nail down what it was and how I would feel about it and all that kind of thing. And it's just it's really it's been so useful to do this extra character work and to kind of really dig deep into the character and not just have it a superficial one-dimensional.
I think I'm thinking about it now.
Archetype, isn't it?
Thinking about it now, I find it really interesting that they've paired someone as curious and sort of inquisitive as your character into all these things with one of the more observant characters of the play,
Yeah,
who's
exactly.
effectively the narrator.
I mean, there's a reason why they're linked
Yeah.
together, like where they spend a lot of time together.
Yeah.
So that's Dakin and scripts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say that one of the, you're talking about the sort of a lot of the characters having a sort of one-dimensional kind of label you can apply to them. And I think that is in itself one of the sort of, I'd say it's part of the culture that the play shows of, it's people trying to find themselves. And so a lot of the characters, they are trying to be these one-dimensional characters, but when you perform that, you've got to perform somebody who is a full, like, changing and very much vulnerable person trying to be
But I guess,
a strong one-dimensional
that's what
person.
you kind of do in school, isn't it? You
you
label yourself. You're like, I don't really fit a niche. I'll be that kid.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just a bit of a defense mechanism, isn't it?
It's wearing a mask.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah.
What about the teachers?
Yeah, now
The teachers.
onto the sort of the slightly more emotionally mature characters, but still
Yeah,
Not actors.
that's
Characters.
true.
Say that through gritted teeth.
So, how have you both been finding your characters? Because I would say that it is from what I can tell, the teachers are certainly a different ball game in terms of in the script. They have a very different role that they need to fulfill, which is basically captivating the audience in its entirety for about 80% of the show. And so, how have you been doing that?
Well, found the interesting thing about Erwin as a character was that the main thing is that he's not meant to be much older than the boys he's teaching. So he's not long been through what they have been through. So he's still sort of got that childish mindset almost, but also having to have like the matureness that comes with it, and also be able to compete and stand his ground with Hector, who's been doing it for decades. Trying to sort of find that balance I found was quite difficult, which, as I say, I agree also is very useful that we did the character work, because normally I'm just used to doing plays where you learn your lines, you You go on, you say them, and then you go home.
Everyone claps.
Or the pub. But yeah, so doing that.
Those and check your flies.
So doing that character work of like, what is Owen's aim? What is he trying to do? Like, what is his inner turmoil? Because you find out that he's got quite a lot of inner turmoil, which
More than most.
I don't know how much I'm allowed to reveal, really.
Anything you like.
Oh, right, okay.
Well-known play.
Well-known play. So, obviously, we don't really know about Owen's sexual orientation, and we wonder sort of whether he got to explore that when he was at school himself, but now we see that he's grows an unhealthy interest in one of the boys that he's teaching, and
I don't think it's that unhealthy.
whether it's unhealthy or healthy is up to the audience. But trying to balance that and also trying to balance the pressure that the headmaster is putting him under to get these boys into Cambridge, because that's what the headmaster thinks that he's done. It's like, oh, you got into Cambridge, you must know how, so therefore teach these kids, you must be able to teach them. So it was trying to find that with all of those emotions going on in his head while also trying to be a teacher. I found that quite challenging, but he's also been very fun to play, I'd say.
I think that's what comes across quite nicely with what you're doing, is the enjoyment of the actor is quite evident, and that's why it's nice to watch. So the energy is fantastic. We've talked about that, obviously, and the focus as well, the driving the scenes. But the character Erwin, there is this incredible level of, as you say, turmoil, conflict. He wrings his way through every scene. He's so conflicted. He's torn in two, if not more, and that's what is so watchable with him. And I think you're totally right as well, that the age gap is so small, and yet he is further, or trying to be further from the boys, more of an authoritarian than Hector, who is actually far older than the boys, and that's another sort of dimension and level. But yeah, I mean, I think what you're doing is fantastic. Because
he tries to sort of make out of like Hector and Erwin as rivals throughout the entire thing, and then in the end it sort of comes to a head where it's like, because Hector's been doing it for so long, he imparts the wisdom of eventually he just starts to become childlike anyway after all that
and
time.
That's what it's all for.
Yeah.
And are you totally different, or are you actually one and the same, just on different
stages?
times?
Yeah.
They're very similar anyway. They both have this like real value of learning. It's just,
just from different angles.
Yeah.
But what about Andy?
Yeah. Well, yeah, Andy.
Well, I started to think, just now when you were saying about the boys being kind of like struggling with their emerging personalities and not being sure about who they are, and covering that up with that kind of some sort of strong veneer. And I don't think Hector's very much further on for all of his years than that, 'cause that's exactly what he's doing. He's just had much longer to perfect it. So he's found his niche and where he is at the school, where he can be a bit different and he can afford to be eccentric, and he can create a small world where he only has to follow his own rules. But he's very thrown, really, by any material challenge to that, I think, particularly. Yeah. I mean, he boxes Owen off, doesn't he? But it's a threat.
Yeah.
I'd say Owen, when you were describing Owen, has the same mask, only the mask is simply being one step ahead of everyone else in terms of academia. He needs to maintain the image that he knows slightly more than all of the boys and slightly more than everyone else in the room. Yeah. And as soon as that gets threatened, which is what Hector offers, that threat, then the reason the two are conflicting is merely that they are the only ones who can see past each other's masks.
Yeah, and they kind of both challenge each other but don't want to be challenged by either one. Like, they both think the other person's the bigger fish who they have to impress.
And of course, as it goes on, they start to align, and
in their mutual hatred of the headmaster.
The headmaster is in fact...
But I think there's only Dorothy. There's only Dorothy who is actually a grown-up in the whole cast.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And when she does eventually have her moment,
it's the best bit of the play.
It's satisfying, you know. I have not hitherto been afforded an inner voice, and then she has it.
It's basically the grown-up smacking all the children across the face and going, be serious now, what are you doing?
You asked me earlier why I chose the History Boys, and obviously Wonderlust as a company is female. It's female led. We're all girls, all women. But that moment in History Boys, when Frances Delatour, for example, delivers that line, it's one of the most satisfying lines in theatre for me.
Oh yeah.
So that was a big sort of driver as well for.
Well, I'd say that's another thing that the play has. It's in a very small amount, but it does have a theme of kind of sort of the ignorance regarding feminism. Like the boys they're not evil, they're not really misogynistic in like a malicious way. They are just completely ignorant. Because the people who grab their attention at that age are the ones who aren't grown up like them, the ones who are immature and who are therefore a bit volatile and put on these masks and put on these big displays, whereas it's history, not histrionics. And so her method of teaching is far more mature and far more grown up, and arguably probably the best of all of them. She doesn't have any sort of interest in the boys in the way that that Hector and Owen do. But arguably, it's the only teacher who would still be employed in a modern school.
A modern setting. You think
there is that issue, of course, like the current climate, shall we say, making this play
set in the 80s.
A way that perhaps it wasn't even when it was first produced. It certainly wasn't when it set. That there is that issue that we have chosen. That isn't the reason that we've chosen it. We're not trying to make any kind of political statements. It is something that we acknowledge, of course, and we do. I think you guys as the actors and we as the production company, we do we deal with it, we tackle it head on, but we perform it as it's written. I'm not interested in making any changes to apologise for it.
No.
That's
well, it would the situation of the play. The reason the play is successful is because of the characters in it, and those characters can only be shown in the way they are because of the events that happen. And so to change any of that would just be, it would just
diminish the play.
It would. It would make it illogical. Like, so why is Hector leaving?
Swade's missing.
Doesn't make any sense.
This isn't Shakespeare. You can't attack it with scissors.
But also, if it was just a cosy nostalgia piece about going to school, it would be shit.
It would be fucking
We'd be bored in 10 minutes.
Well, it would, and he throws that in not by mistake. Do you know what I mean? It makes it's an uncomfortable situation, and I'm not sure it wouldn't have been shrugged off in the day.
No.
It wouldn't have been, and particularly not because it was a man touching up boys.
No, certainly not. I don't think it would have been. They would have just turned a blind eye to it or anything like that. I mean, when you see him interviewed in America, they don't get it.
No. And I think he plays it down as he does everything. I think Bennett is disingenuous about how important his sexuality and homosexuality is in his plays, because he's not really drawn on the subject, is he?
No.
Well, I think I would say that a sort of a major part of progressing like art and culture in general is to have those sort of themes in a play without it being something that makes people stop and go. Having it be there and it be normal, because that's the point that we people want to get to.
It's not really the focus, is it?
Yeah.
Kind of,
I mean, there's something to be said. Certainly, I think you're right. He's not outspoken about it. He certainly, as you said in your recent blog, which we'll talk about.
We'll talk about that momentarily.
He's not a gay playwright. It's not a gay play, and I totally agree with what you say. It's not the crux of the play. It's not the platform that he's written it for. It does appear as part of the fabric of the piece, but it's still something that we can draw upon and make a theme of if we choose to, and I think we do to a certain extent.
I'd say so.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, a wonderful Andy has written a very nice blog post on the Wanderlust blog, which if you're checking out this podcast, you should definitely check out the blog. It's very good, and it's got loads of updates about what's happening with the show, and loads of like cast pictures. You get to see a bit behind the scenes, but part of that has been Andy has put together a blog about the theme of homosexuality within the play, And I guess if you just give a short kind of summary for those who haven't read it yet.
It's bloody long, Andy.
TLDR, give us
Too long did not mean it's long, but it's brilliant.
Entice them into your read.
It's an abstract, that's all it is.
But I guess I connect very strongly to this play on lots of different levels because, I went to school in the 1980s. I was, unbeknown to myself, a gay boy growing up on the Durham coalfield. I was coached to apply for Cambridge and rejected by King's College, much to my relief. And so there's a strong identification with the boys' journey in it. And now, because I'm a 51-year-old man, with an interest in art and somebody who quotes from plays and waves my hand about and does all kinds of things. So it's not a real coincidence that I was cast as Hector in the first place. I'm looking at Lauren now for the microphone.
Oh, I'm delighted. I'm so relieved.
So what so my past and my present are not hugely removed. The difference is I'm not closeted and I don't touch up boys. I can't drive a motorbike. Luckily for you guys. But that issue of what that's like and carrying that identity in an alien, hostile environment, I think is something that informs the play on all the levels that you've just talked about. So not just a political level about whether we were free to love who we choose or even just to shag who we choose without getting arrested, but actually that you could have any kind of identity beyond that and carry it safely in the place where you spent most of your day, let alone be considered as an equal part on that basis. And a huge proportion of the cast are struggling with those, of the characters in the play are struggling. I mean, there's proportionately more gays in this play than there are in Emmerdale.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Cultural reference.
That's actually what we're going to sell the play on.
More gays than Emmerdale. History boys, better than Emmerdale.
That's the best thing I've heard all day.
So when I went to school, there was Section 28. Teachers were forbidden to lend any kind of equal status to same-sex relationships. I don't think there was ever any prosecutions through it, but teachers would self-police themselves. Teachers would closet themselves. They'd be terrified of coming out. So those situations, where Posner's looking for some support and looking for some guidance, they can only be closed off, and it's a phase, because there's not really any safe way of making that connection. So I guess that's part of it, and then the other part is the richness of the text. So if it wasn't a gay play, then why is every single cultural reference have a queer sensibility? Every film, every poet, every philosopher has had his own kind. From behind.
Of course.
And it becomes an 18.
I think it was already with the niche
With
or
cust.
I'm going to leave a little gap as well for you. So you can
It's the
put
option
that.
to edit.
I think there's a scene at the end of the first half where we see Posner and Hector have arguably, probably the most famous moment in the play. They have their moment. And we see the generations coming together with that very, very, very shared aspect of their sexuality and their identity in that sense. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So though it may not necessarily be it may not be known as an LGBT play, it is for our purposes, and we have held true to that. I think, importantly.
I'd say one of the things we were talking about the different themes of it and how it's a play that will we think will last the test of time, and I think that is definitely one of the themes that will carry the best, because it is a point in which we can say at this point in history this is how it was for homosexuals, and this is how it was, especially in the education system, which at the end of the day, the most important thing to combat any form of xenophobia is ensuring that the next generation are educated to know xenophobia, prejudice in any form. So I'd say that if somebody, if the only way that's ever going to be sort of combated in a sort of major way is to ensure that the teachers that are looking after the next generation are well informed and free to and especially if this is a time when there is specific laws in place to make sure that teachers don't.
They're still doing it now, aren't they? There's issues with it now.
In Birmingham, his parents are protesting until very recently outside a primary school that you couldn't tell those kids that what we were talking about.
Wow.
Well, or that because you've got two mums that they have no.
Yeah,
we're not allowed to mention
in a textbook.
I don't know what they think as.
Two men or two women.
As someone who's recently started working as a teacher, schools are expected to uphold what is called the British values, which is it's the wording of it is contested. It should, in my opinion, as well as others, be called human values, because they're just human values that you should respect everyone, be inclusive of all different groups. But for some reason, it's been these nice behaviours have been branded as specifically British for some reason. But yeah, shocking.
Rather hypocritical.
Quite.
Do not kill people.
Yeah.
So then we can add the racism and imperialism.
Just add water.
Instant bigots.
But that's.
Cameron lose his job.
No. Well, that's this year for dance. No, but it's very much a case of trying to provide for that. I've actually had the great grace of working in a very lovely multicultural school where there was a massive diversity of people from a wide walk of backgrounds, and I can't imagine going to a white British school in the same way, because everyone was so open and tolerant to all of these different ideas. And I remember hearing some fabulous conversations that were so completely ill-informed, and just the way that children would talk about these issues of homosexuality and stuff, and they're completely ignorant of the nuances of it, but by the same token supporting it in such a fervent way. But I also had experience in a white British school, and I remember it so vividly. There was it was Valentine's Day, and they had to had to deliver sort of a PSHE lesson on Valentine's Day. I was like, so what's Valentine's Day celebrating? It's love. And then one little girl in year 1 put her hand up and said, love's not just between a man and a woman. You can have a man and a woman and a woman. And half the class go, yeah! And then half the class go, ugh! And it was such an odd position, because it is my job to take that positive side and unintentionally on a Friday afternoon have to defend homosexuality. It was quite an odd experience.
Sort of broaden their understanding of.
Yeah, but I doubt any of these primary school children would, if quizzed further
see the show.
about their opinion. Well, they should definitely not see the show. But
maybe not.
but if you ask them further, then they'd probably just be like,
everything, don't they?
Yeah.
Whinging.
I would like to have a go at censoring the script of history. Just see how much gets removed.
Cut out all of the offensive bits. Like it.
Why is Hector leaving? I don't know.
We'll find out when you're.
That happened in school occasionally. Teachers would just disappear.
Yeah. I think we should definitely mention the incredible Alex Burke, who is playing Posner.
Oh yes. What a gem.
I think, as far as sort of Wonderlust Theatre Company goes, we are absolutely intent on finding, absolutely incredible young talent. Obviously, with less children, I suppose we're not a youth company as such, but Alex is 18 and a rare sort of talent. I think he's blowing everybody's minds at the moment, and Posner is quite a character, arguably perhaps the most challenging of the boys to play. So we have been extremely fortunate to find him.
Not just because of the acting, because of the singing as well.
Incredible, I mean, he his audition will stay with me for a long time. When he started to sing, and also because of course Posner is Bennett, or has been seen to be Bennett, and he's put himself in the play and his own journey, and his being actually quite similar to yours, Andy, and he looks like Alan Bennett, which is
perfect.
I'm fighting all of my urges to put glasses on the kid, so that's we should, I think, if for no other reason, and there are many reasons, I think he is a definite draw for an audience if you're into an incredible performance. That's one not to miss, definitely not.
Speaking of performances...
Sorry, I was just going to say, Cameron's there saying, I like the bloody piano. Singing? Really? I like the piano.
Yeah, but I'm on a word count, Alex.
You've already used up all your words now.
I've used
Can't
up
speak
all my
anymore
words.
for the rest of the...
I spoke about British values in school, so anyway. But yeah, I'm learning piano.
And good.
There's a lot of commitment in the cast. It's good.
Yeah, no, of course.
I've worked with Lauren before. I did Taming of the Shrew with Lauren. That was the first time I worked with you, and I didn't for no other play am I learning an instrument, and for no other play have I bought a bag that is full of everything that I need.
So many drawings of penises.
There's so many drawings of penises in that notebook.
Wherever we go, it's brilliant.
No, you do not vandalise things.
We didn't vandalise anything that wasn't already ours.
Cameron is perhaps the most method of the actors within the cast, and he is turning into scripts slowly but surely. Attending church on a Sunday and...
Do you know what?
You actually think
I very nearly did. When I was living with you, Alex, I was really tempted to go to the church just by Carnatic. I was really tempted to go. Yeah, well, I might go to the cathedral. I might go Paddy's Wigwam on a Sunday.
That's Catholic,
He's
though.
more of a Methodist.
Oh yeah, I am an Anglican. Yeah, I'd have to go to the.
You have to
I don't know. I get
specifically avoid.
I mentioned the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yeah,
Canterbury?
Canterbury.
Canter Horton here's a who.
Now, I'd say we do have one other piece, right, guys?
That we do.
So we have another wonderful piece with Hector and Owen.
And so just a little bit of context for the scene, I suppose. Owen has realised that the boys have got all of this knowledge which Hector has given to them that might not necessarily be useful, that is useful in the normal sense, but they're just bits of information or bits of poetry or quotations from various different authors that he thinks might just tip the balance of getting them into Oxford and Cambridge to impress the examiners, making them stand out from the norm. And so this scene is basically Erwin trying to ask Hector whether he can encourage the boys to actually use what he's been telling them, because the boys are reluctant to use what he's been telling them
to make us more rounded human beings.
Not for the exam.
Yeah. Okay, so
I agree with that.
so that's where this scene comes from. It's just the boys seem to know more than they're telling.
That's hardly surprising. Oh shit! Now I just booked it up already.
Jesus.
Post-production.
Yeah.
Okay.
Start again.
Yeah.
Editing.
My dog clicker. It's just there. And now I'm going.
We're not in the zone, are we? I don't
No.
expected to perform under these conditions.
Yes.
Where's my soy latte?
I must say, it is weird for going from doing it on the stage to then just sitting down on a sofa and just
I felt very strange.
yeah, weird, isn't it?
You guys are talking a lot less than you would normally.
Which is weird, because we've both done audio stuff
I did some yesterday.
Yeah, we're both voice acting in a video game, and it's like we were both. I'm assuming you were fine doing it. Yeah, we were both fine doing it, and now we're doing the exact same thing, but it's fucking weird.
You're performing it on stage. That's obviously
you learn.
It's not meant for this kind of medium.
The size and the energy.
State-induced learning is
remembering my lines from being sat down is
sometimes I can't do my lines without doing any
it's the emotions.
If your body's not in the right orientation, you're like, nope, this feels wrong. We need to be stood up.
Is she all making excuses for the line run that we're going to do ahead of time?
Yes.
Now that you've said that, no.
I mean, I'll be fine for the line run, Lauren, so long as I'm facing north-northeast.
And we're wearing green and it's Thursday, which it will be.
Right, let's hit this.
Let's hit the nail on the head, shall we? Shall I get rid of all of that?
No. Possibly, yeah.
No.
Put it in at the end for no reason.
Just the outtakes section with a bit of jazz music.
I do like Andy saying I fucked it up already, to be honest. At the beginning.
Alright, okay, so it's just the boys seem to know more than they're telling.
Don't most boys? Surely diffidence is to be encouraged.
In an examination, they seem to have gotten hold of the notion that the stuff they do with you is off limits as far as the examination is concerned.
That's hardly surprising. I count examinations, even for Oxford and Cambridge, as the enemy of education. Which is not to say I don't count education as the enemy of education. However, if you think it will help, I will speak to them.
I'd appreciate it. And for what it's worth, I do sympathise with your feelings about examinations, but they are a fact of life. I know you want them to do well, and the gobbets you've taught them might just tip the balance.
What did you call them? Gobbets? Is that what you think they are, gobbets? Handy little quotes to be trotted out to make a point. Gobbets. Spells, codes, runes, call them what you will, but do not call them gobbets.
I just thought it would be useful.
Oh, it would. It would be useful. Every answer a Christmas tree hung with the appropriate gobbets, except they are learned by heart. And that is where they belong, and, like the other components of the heart, not to be defiled by being trotted out to order.
So what are they meant to be storing them up for, then, these boys? Education isn't something for when they're old and grey, sitting by the fire. It's for now. The exam is next month.
And what happens after the exam? Life goes on. Gobbets.
Lovely. I'm feeling like this might be a really good radio play. I really do.
I think a lot of it does work really
Sound
well.
effects and...
Arguably, some of it might work better than it does on stage.
Well, I might not go that far. Do come see the show.
Other things like the scraping school chairs and things.
Oh, the little ambient sound.
If you want the radio experience, come see the show and close your eyes.
Blindfolds will be out the door.
I'm trying to imagine that no blocking rehearsals were needed.
Didn't spend 6 months blocking this. 6 months. Yeah, it will be 6 months by the time we go.
Yeah, well.
Crikey.
We've put a lot of commitment into this play, is what we're trying to say.
Yeah, we've worked bloody hard.
Yeah, really hard.
But I'd say, that's another scene where that is arguably one of the sort of the most sort of ideological confrontations that the two main teachers have. But even then, it's still wonderful to listen to in the way it's written, and also the way it's performed. It's one of the things where it's still got the humour, it's still got the layers of I'd say even vulnerability, because Hector is hurt by the way he's referring to his whole niche, his whole role in the school is to make his students, cultured, people, and now Owen's coming along and saying that it's useless because it doesn't fit into an exam.
Going back to my experiences as a teacher and the stuff that I've learnt as a teacher, only now have Ofsted realised that there's this massive narrowing of the curriculum, that there's only really English and maths that are being heavily focused on in schools, because that's, well, at least in primary schools anyway, because that's what's being examined, and you get children that are very literate and know their grammar back to front, and you get children that can work out wonderful calculations and be very good mathematicians, and then you question them on what we might assume to be quite basic history or something that we learnt at school, like what happened in Henry VIII, like King William the Conqueror, stuff like that, and they'll turn around and go, who? I remember very distinctly at the first time, like I taught geography. Geography was the first ever thing I taught on my student placement, and someone asked me a question, and it was to do with it was to do with the Roman Empire or something. The answer linked back to the Roman Empire, and I knew that the Roman Empire was on the history curriculum. And I asked them, did you do the Romans in history? I was so shocked when the entire class went, no. Like, there's just this massive narrowing on the curriculum, and like Ofsted now have now looked at other countries who are so far ahead of us in terms of education, and they've gone, it's because they're looking at all the subjects, and they're like, their curriculum is much wider, and they're trotting out far more sort of intellectual children. So that's like their inspections as are now going to be looking at like how wide your curriculum is, whether you're actually getting in your history, geography, all the stuff that sort of makes you well-rounded human beings now. So that should be seeing a return in schools, fingers crossed.
I made a little cardboard sword and shield when we studied the Battle of Hastings in primary school. We did it all in like the assembly hall, and they like showed us what happened in it.
We went to a country house and dressed as like the people who work there.
My picture in the programme is from when I went to Tatton Hall on Victorian.
That was it. Yeah, Victorian bus. It was amazing.
I went to
That was Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown.
I did
We drank beer. That was it.
Wow.
The teacher used to write his notes in chalk on a blackboard. And then we'd sit and copy them into an exercise book.
Yeah, we had
So don't get all that rosy glow about how the past used to be and we learned 1066, because I'm not sure that was of any great broadening of the mind. Sit in a class and write stuff and regurgitate it wasn't that good.
So you didn't make a Roman shield and then form a tortoise with your classmates?
No, I think we did that. I think we did that as well.
I would have loved that.
But I did remember the route of the Long March from Shanghai to wherever it was for about 20 years.
So, I mean, that's all we've got time for, really. But we hope to see you.
As if it's a slot.
We've got time for, ladies and gentlemen.
guys.
Thank you for your time. And remember,
Literally what we got time for.
Stay frosty, Sandy.
stay history,
That's done.
boys.
And so that's our podcast done. And we'll hopefully see you all at the Hope Street Theatre on the 24th to the 27th of July. Come every day. It'll be great. But yeah, and it's been really good fun.
Yeah.
So if everyone say bye.
Hopefully see you there.
Bye.
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 Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.